The room was filled with the sound of heavy breathing.
Ha, ha, ha.
The alarm on his phone went off, breaking the silence.
Beep, beep, beep.
All right, you can stop now.
Emma's sweet voice cut through the air as she observed Lucas, his sweat-drenched body glistening under the light.
It's okay, I can keep going a bit longer.
Not bad, you've done over 100 push-ups this time. Looks like those abs are just around the corner.
Emma took note of Lucas's workout time and the number of push-ups he performed, preparing for the next exercise routine. She glanced down at him, sprawled on the floor.
Get up, or you'll catch a chill.
Lucas's black tank top was soaked, his body clearly showing signs of a grueling workout, but his eyes sparkled with determination. He reached out his hand to Emma.
Can you give me a hand?
Emma took a tissue from her bag, placed it in Lucas's palm, and then helped him up.
Thanks for letting me hold your hand, benefactor.
Humph. Go take a shower, then we'll have a late-night snack.
Emma glared at him, pointing towards the door, indicating she'd wait outside. Lucas nodded and turned to shower. Watching Lucas's gradually strengthening figure, Emma silently awarded herself a Good Samaritan prize for saving a young man from a path of potential ruin. Meeting Lucas was actually a result of fulfilling the original owner's wish to visit a bar. I accepted an invitation from one of the original owner's drinking buddies and went to the bar. However, I felt out of place and wanted to leave. That's when I noticed Lucas in the corner. He was dressed in a suit, with the top button of his shirt undone, lying on the sofa looking fragile and pitiful. Driven by curiosity, I made my way through the crowd towards him.
Hi, how much would it cost to keep you?
Lucas looked up at me, clearly surprised. He tugged at his suit collar and smiled.
Name your price.
And so, I ended up supporting Lucas, who had told me his father had passed away, his mother was bedridden, and he had to earn money to support his family. Let's go, Lucas's voice interrupted my thoughts, the scent of his shower gel lingering around me. Suddenly, an idea flashed in my mind. I brought Lucas to the bar where we first met. Throughout the journey, Lucas protectively guided me to our booth.
Why did you want to come here?
No particular reason. Just felt like coming here to have some fun.
He gave me a helpless look, declined the server's offer to pour me a drink, and handed me a beverage instead. I took it and turned to carefully observe his profile.
Lucas was dressed in a suit similar to the one he wore when we first met, but this time he looked more refined and elegant. Before coming to the bar, I had helped him with some makeup, making his features even more striking, his alluring eyes reminiscent of a captivating fox. Seeing Lucas in this completely transformed state, a sense of pride welled up within me. This was the joy of nurturing. As someone who loved dress-up games, I had invested a lot of money in such games after arriving in this world. Eventually, I grew tired of them, but my interest in helping people transform remained. So that night at the bar, besides fulfilling the original owner's wish, I was also looking for someone to help make over. Lucas appeared at just the right moment. Over the past month, perhaps influenced by his sunny and cheerful demeanor, I learned a lot and realized I shouldn't try to change people. Lucas wasn't data that I could modify at will. He followed my plans, probably because of the money or because these changes didn't affect him much. Or maybe, I felt my heart gradually sinking deeper into our interactions. So, I needed to stop before it was too late. I turned to look at Lucas, his defined jawline hidden in the darkness. Meeting here and saying goodbye here seemed fitting, a full circle. I took a few sips of the drink Lucas had ordered for me, feeling increasingly uneasy. The thought of having to say something that felt like a breakup, but wasn't quite a breakup, made my emotions churn. I put down the glass, which clinked against the table. Lucas, who was watching the stage, noticed the sound and turned to look at me. Seeing my anxious expression, concern filled his eyes. Gathering my courage, I grabbed his hand and pulled him outside. Lucas let me lead him to a dark corner outside the bar.
What's wrong?
Well, Lucas. I hesitated but decided to tell him in person that I wouldn't be supporting him anymore. If he got too upset, my other hand was ready to call for help. Hearing my words, a strange look of anticipation appeared on Lucas's face. Was he expecting me to say I wouldn't support him anymore? Just as I was about to continue, a voice behind me interrupted.
Luna?
Before I could turn around, Lucas pulled me into a tight embrace, making it impossible to break free. Then I heard his low voice above me.
Who are you calling?
The slightly tipsy man couldn't see clearly and mistook me for someone else. Realizing his mistake upon hearing Lucas's voice, he quickly apologized and left. What are you doing? I broke free from Lucas's embrace and turned to see the man already gone.
Sorry, you're too attractive. I was worried someone might have bad intentions.
I frowned, sensing something off about him, but I didn't ask and didn't continue the previous topic. It's fine, let's go back. Lucas didn't ask either. He nodded, looking thoughtful. Despite a minor hiccup, Luna decided to let go of this young man. She paid him a monthly salary of 5,000 yuan, and he only provided emotional value and let her admire his beautiful physique. Thinking about it, she felt at a loss. Her previously hesitant thoughts became firmer. She picked up her phone from the table and opened the chat with Lucas. Decisively, she pasted the message she had prepared earlier.
Lucas, I have transferred your monthly salary to your bank account. Thank you for letting me admire your beautiful physique during this time. Your body has become better than before, and I believe you will find a better patron than me. P.S. You could consider becoming a streamer or something. You have a good-looking face, although those jobs might earn money a bit slower.
Luna initially thought of giving Lucas the contact information of her friends in the entertainment industry but decided against it, fearing he might come looking for her. After sending the message, she immediately deleted Lucas from her contacts and threw her phone onto the sofa. She reassured herself that Lucas didn't have her phone number or address, and she had paid him without signing a contract. She had perfectly resolved a potentially troublesome situation. Desperately, she tried to suppress the unease in her heart. A few days passed, and my phone didn't receive any calls or harassing messages, which put my mind at ease. But staying at home for too long was boring, and I happened to see news on my phone about young people signing up for senior citizen travel groups. On a whim, I signed myself up. During the week-long trip, from initial anxiety and worry to adapting and getting along with the elderly, it only took a day. There, I received the long-lost care from elders. However, on the last day of the trip, I received a call from a family elder, asking me to attend a banquet the next evening, so I had to bid farewell to this short yet joyful trip. At the studio, I changed into a glamorous dress and set off. The venue was resplendent, with people mingling and getting to know each other. I made a symbolic appearance and then ran to a corner to enjoy the food alone. Just as I found a secluded corner and sat down, a woman with long, cascading hair, wearing a strapless gown, and looking gentle and elegant, walked towards me. With her right in front of me, I had no choice but to greet her, and she sat down beside me.
Hello, I'm Sophia from the Su family.
My pupils dilated instantly. The fake heiress? So, this Su family was the one hosting the banquet. I stole glances at Sophia, her demeanor was graceful, and every move exuded elegance. Seeing Sophia like this, I became even more curious about the real heiress and the male lead. As these thoughts flashed through my mind, I turned and met the gaze of a man with an impressive posture. His eyes didn't linger on me, they shifted to Sophia. He stared intently at Sophia and walked towards us.
Hello, I'm Luna.
Nice to meet you. I'm Samuel.
Samuel briefly introduced himself and then sat beside Sophia without saying a word to her. Sitting there like a third wheel, the awkward atmosphere made me want to escape, but I was here first. Besides, I wanted to see the real heiress. I waited and waited, but the two beside me remained silent like ice machines. Growing impatient, I decided to leave. As soon as I stood up, the two beside me also stood up. The door opened again, and I saw the patriarch of the Su family, accompanied by someone with long hair, wearing a modern Chinese-style robe. My eyes lit up, this must be the real heiress. Holding my wine glass, I quietly took a few steps to get a better look at her face. Samuel seemed to sense my intention and stepped aside.
Thank you.
To my surprise, I met a gaze that was fixed on me, with a hint of resentment. Following the gaze downward, I recognized that face, it was the face of that young man. I admit I panicked. I remembered Lucas was a guy, could this be his twin sister? Or was he cross-dressing? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the second thought. Then I saw Lucas say a few words to the patriarch and head towards us. My mind went blank, and I instinctively wanted to leave. Unexpectedly, Lucas called out to me.
Luna.
I suddenly turned my head. I had never told Lucas my full name, I always let him call me Ms. Smith. How did he know to call me Luna? My pupils contracted, and it felt like the spikes on my body were ready to pierce Lucas at any moment. Seeing my reaction, Lucas understood and subtly relaxed his shoulders, which I couldn't see. He slowly walked towards me. He held a glass of red wine, his waist-length hair shining with a luster that made it impossible to tell it was a wig. It looked as if it had grown naturally from Lucas's head. If I didn't remember the short hair he had the day we parted, I might have believed it was real. I got distracted for a moment.
The quality of this wig is pretty good. Maybe I could get one for the kids at the hospital.
But as Lucas gradually approached, I dismissed the idea of asking him for the link. I didn't want any connection with the main characters, and I felt my life here was good. I didn't want it disrupted. I decided to treat Lucas as a stranger. After all, I was the one supporting him, and perhaps he didn't want others to know about his disguise. I composed myself, put on a polite smile, and, holding my wine glass, said to the approaching Lucas.
Hello, my name is Evelyn.
Lucas's smile faltered for a moment, his brows furrowed slightly before quickly relaxing. As our glasses clinked, I heard his response in the clear sound.
My surname is Sophia, and my name is Lydia. Lydia, as in the character from the city of Luoyang, with the character for king and the character for plus.
I gripped my wine glass tightly, my lips pressed together, trying to suppress the urge to flee. I adjusted my facial expression and forced a smile.
Miss Sophia, your name is lovely, but I have something to attend to now. Goodbye, Miss Sophia.
After saying this, I immediately put down my glass, grabbed my skirt, and left the venue without looking back. I left decisively, so I naturally didn't see Lucas, with his altered voice, revert to his normal tone when he saw the fake heiress and the male lead. The three of them gathered, looking in the direction I had left, their expressions somewhat serious. Sitting in the car, I maintained my facade in front of the driver. Once back in my room, I quickly took off the dress and ran to the bathroom to remove my makeup. Looking at the face in the mirror and thinking about the name Lucas had mentioned, my self-loathing grew stronger. I released my grip on the sink, sat weakly on the floor, hugged my knees, and buried my head in them. Large tears rolled down my cheeks. I thought I had cried all my tears the day my mother passed away. In my previous life, I was an actress, known by the stage name Lydia. Although not a major star, I managed to land a few supporting roles each year to make a living. Unexpectedly, a baseless rumor shattered my situation. As a minor actress, I was defamed, cyberbullied, and degraded in every possible way. Some even sent me private messages offering to support me. My private messages were flooded, and my daily address was exposed. The rumor about me topped the trending list, while the clarifications went unnoticed. No one believed the statements my agent released, and I was stuck in a quagmire with no one to pull me out. The only solace during that storm was that my mother didn't use a smartphone, so she remained unaware of the bad news. In her eyes, I was still the clean, hardworking girl saving money to buy her a house. Later, my mother's illness, which she had hidden from me, suddenly worsened. I took her to a major hospital and spent all my earnings from acting to save her. It was futile. I had no family left. The day I successfully ended my life, I arrived in this world. A new world brought more happiness, with plenty of money and excellent resources. Yet, the emptiness in my heart was hard to fill. I stayed up until the early hours each night, unable to sleep. I didn't dare to make friends or see a therapist. Ironically, the month I supported Lucas was the month I slept the earliest. Our daily meetings were from 7 to 9 p.m., and he often asked me to take him places. With bodyguards protecting me, I always agreed. Exhausted from our outings, I would naturally fall asleep early upon returning home. But I was still deceived. I lifted my head, wiped away the tears, and looked up at the glaring ceiling. I knew we were just strangers, and Lucas had no obligation to reveal so much to me, especially since I hadn't done so myself. Yet, my heart ached as if it were dying, the pain almost overwhelming my feelings for Lucas. I fainted in the bathroom from the pain. As my consciousness faded, I heard frantic knocking, followed by the door being forced open and a figure appearing before I completely blacked out. Beep, beep, beep. The woman lying on the hospital bed fluttered her eyelashes and moved her hand. The man sitting beside her noticed signs of her waking up and quickly left the room. Shortly after he left, the woman slowly opened her eyes. Adjusting to the light in the room, I looked around the hospital room and then propped myself up to sit. At that moment, the door opened and I saw Mrs. Thompson, the original owner's nanny.
Miss, you're awake.
Seeing me awake, Mrs. Thompson hurriedly placed the items she was holding on the table and pressed the call button by the bed. The doctor and nurse arrived promptly, conducted an examination, and concluded that I had fainted due to exhaustion and overthinking, which my heart couldn't handle. They said I could be discharged after staying in the hospital for 2 more days. Once the medical staff left, it was just Mrs. Thompson and me in the room. Relieved to hear that I was fine, Mrs. Thompson walked over to the table, picked up the porridge she had packed, and placed it on the table beside my bed.
I didn't know when you would wake up, but the doctor said you might wake up this morning, so I went out to buy some porridge, worried that you might be hungry when you woke up.
Mrs. Thompson opened the porridge and handed me a spoon. I took the spoon and smiled slightly.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson.
I took a sip of the porridge, and the warm porridge indeed made my stomach feel much better. Moreover, Mrs. Thompson had bought my favorite flavor, so I eagerly finished the bowl. Feeling full and content, my mood improved.
Mrs. Thompson, how did you know I fainted in the bathroom?
Mrs. Thompson paused for a moment while tidying up the table, then smiled and said,
I was worried that you hadn't eaten much at the party, so I wanted to bring you something to eat. When I entered the room and didn't see you, I noticed the bathroom light was on. I knocked and called for you, but you didn't respond, so I forced the door open.
I nodded and lowered my gaze. Mrs. Thompson's explanation seemed flawless, but in my hazy state, I vaguely remembered seeing a tall man. Perhaps it was just my imagination. I slowly slid back down and fell asleep again. When I woke up, I was alone in the room, and it was already afternoon. I guessed Mrs. Thompson had gone to buy dinner, so I decided to take a walk outside the hospital room before she returned. Realizing my phone wasn't with me, I borrowed a pen and paper from the nurse's station to leave a note for Mrs. Thompson. The floor where my room was located seemed to be reserved for VIPs, as there wasn't much foot traffic. I strolled around the floor like an old man taking a leisurely walk. After completing a circuit, I planned to return to my room to wait for Mrs. Thompson. As I reached the corner, I saw Mrs. Thompson carrying several boxes, about to enter the room. Just as I was about to call out to her, I noticed a man appear behind her and call her name. My brows furrowed involuntarily. Why was Lucas here? I hid around the corner, trying to eavesdrop on their conversation, but I couldn't hear anything due to the distance. I saw Lucas hand something to Mrs. Thompson, who accepted it, and then he left. Before leaving, Lucas glanced around, which scared me into quickly hiding. After a while, I emerged from the corner and walked into the hospital room as if nothing had happened. Mrs. Thompson was setting up dinner. Seeing me return, she quickly invited me to eat.
Come, dear, join me for dinner.
I responded and sat down, quickly thinking things over. Then, with a smile, I said, Mrs. Thompson, let's eat together and have a chat. Mrs. Thompson smiled kindly and sat down to eat with me. After some thought, I pretended to be curious and asked, Mrs. Thompson, you've been with my family for a long time. I'm quite curious about your previous experiences taking care of others. Seeing my interest, Mrs. Thompson began to tell me about the first family she took care of. I was her fourth employer. But when she talked about the third family, I sensed something was off.
The third family I took care of had a little boy and his mother. His mother was very strict with him. If he didn't come first in his class, she wouldn't let him eat. And she was very biased. I don't know if she had a daughter before, but the boy's room looked like a girl's room, with pink walls and dolls everywhere. I even found some little dresses in his closet.
Mrs. Thompson put down her chopsticks and leaned in to whisper.
I quietly asked the boy if he liked wearing dresses. He told me his mother bought them for him and made him wear one every week, even if he didn't like it. Poor child. Fortunately, he's grown up now. I just saw him.
Realizing she had said too much, Mrs. Thompson quickly changed the subject, and I followed along, but my heart was pounding. After dinner, I told Mrs. Thompson to go home. She thought for a moment and agreed. Alone in the hospital room, I began to think hard. I had come to this world after a desperate act, but why did fate give me a second chance? And the name Lydia, Lucas's behavior. I felt that my crossing over wasn't so simple. I lay in bed, tossing and turning until dawn, unable to sleep. I got up and stood by the window, looking out at the sky. The sky was dotted with twinkling stars, and the moonlight was as pure as white jade. The beautiful scene calmed me down a bit. After looking up at the sky for a long time, my neck started to ache. I lowered my head and turned my neck, and my gaze fell on a familiar figure. Under the dim streetlight, Lucas was lying on a bench, his head resting on something like a bag, covered only by a jacket. His eyes were closed, as if he were already in a deep sleep, but his furrowed brows revealed his discomfort. I bit my lip, a hint of hesitation in my eyes. Finally, I put on my coat and walked out of the hospital room.
Lucas, wake up! Don't sleep here! Lucas!
I pushed him hard, but he didn't respond. Frowning, I reached out to touch his forehead. It was burning hot. The intense heat made me realize immediately that he had a fever. Lacking the strength to help him myself, I quickly ran to the second floor of the building to find a nurse and asked her to check on Lucas. By the time Lucas was settled in a hospital bed, it was already 5 in the morning. Exhausted from running around, I lay back on my own bed to rest. When I woke up the next day, intending to check on Lucas, I saw him sitting in a chair in my room, looking down at his phone. The man had clearly washed up. He was dressed in a clean, sharp suit, his face chiseled. His brows were slightly furrowed, and the dark circles under his charming eyes indicated he hadn't been sleeping well. Seeing Lucas like this, I suddenly remembered the time when I was supporting him. He often dressed like a college student, in a white t-shirt and jeans, full of youthful energy like a lively golden retriever. Now, he resembled a wolf ready to strike. Noticing that I was awake, he immediately put down his phone and walked to my bedside.
Miss Smith, thank you for helping me. I've already paid for the hospital room. Since you're awake, I'll take my leave now.
With that, Lucas turned to leave the room. I watched his departing figure, a fleeting sadness in my eyes.
Lucas, who exactly are you?
His hand paused on the door handle, and he stopped in his tracks. Noticing his reaction, I continued.
Today, my nanny told me a story about a little boy. Coincidentally, I've heard the exact same story before. I don't want to comment too much on the protagonist of the story, nor do I want to discuss the flaws of this world. I just have one question. Lucas, who exactly are you? I didn't get an answer from Lucas. He left. But before he did, he sighed helplessly and left a remark.
Luna, you still haven't remembered.
He used to call me boss so sweetly, but now he coldly calls me Ms. Smith. He still calls me Luna, yet he tells me nothing. I lay on my large bed at home, turned over, and buried my face in the pillow. What does he mean by haven't remembered? Have I lost some memories? I compared everyone from my past life with Lucas, and finally realized that none of them had a personality like his. Could it be that story? I indeed hadn't heard the story Mrs. Thompson mentioned. I only brought it up with Lucas to trick him into revealing the truth, but he saw through it. Speaking of which, why did Lucas disguise himself as a woman? And if I remember correctly, this is a story about mistaken identities. Does Sophia know about this? While I was pondering the possible stories of the Su family, my phone rang. It was Sophia inviting me to an auction. I had never been to an auction, and I wanted to use this opportunity to probe Sophia, so I agreed. I entered the auction with Sophia, holding our number cards. Sophia sat next to me, exchanged a few words, and then focused intently on the auction. I casually flipped through the catalog in my hand, glancing at Sophia out of the corner of my eye. Seeing her so engrossed, I decided to follow her lead and pay attention as well.
This one looks interesting, don't you think?
During the auction, Sophia bid on a few items. Not understanding much, I didn't bid on anything. Then came the last item of the auction. I turned to the corresponding page in the catalog. When I saw the last item, my body stiffened, and I looked at the picture in disbelief. It was a jade ring. It was my mother's keepsake.
This jade ring is from 2,000 years ago.
The auctioneer's words trailed off because, as soon as I realized what the jade ring was, the world around me began to collapse bit by bit. The people around me froze and slowly disappeared. I turned to look at Sophia beside me. She smiled, reached out, and patted my head.
Luna, we'll wait for you outside.
The world crumbled, and darkness enveloped me. My consciousness began to fade. When I woke up and opened my eyes, I found myself in the hospital again. This time, however, I could clearly feel the weakness and fatigue emanating from my body. Just as I was about to prop myself up, the door to the ward was suddenly flung open. A man, looking travel-worn, rushed over to me. He gently supported my waist and helped me lean against the pillow. Even this slight movement made me take several deep breaths to recover. He handed me a glass of water from the bedside table, allowing me to take a few sips to moisten my throat. Then he sat by the bed, holding my hand tightly, his eyes filled with concern. Seeing Lucas's reaction, I couldn't help but smile inwardly. I didn't want the atmosphere to become too heavy, so I teased him.
Lucas, even when I was there, your name didn't trigger any emotional response in me. Aren't you afraid that when I come back, I might not love you anymore and break up with you?
I'm not afraid. If that happens, I'll just pursue you all over again. But what I fear is you not coming back.
Lucas's voice choked up, and his eyes turned red. My eyes also began to well up, and tears started to fall uncontrollably. Lucas quickly grabbed a tissue, gently wiping away my tears, and patted my back softly.
Don't be afraid, Luna. We're back.
In fact, my attempt to end my life was almost successful, but just at the critical moment, Lucas, my boyfriend, came home. During that time, he was always worried that something might happen to me, so he insisted that I stay in the living room where there was surveillance. So when he found that I wasn't in the living room and I wasn't answering my phone, he rushed back from the office. He didn't expect to find me in the bathroom, surrounded by a scene of red, with a faint smile on my face. He hurriedly took me to the hospital. The doctors worked for hours, and even issued a critical condition notice, but fortunately they managed to save me in the end, though I ended up in a coma. Lucas happened to be researching brainwaves at the time. Using himself as a test subject, he conducted countless experiments and finally found the direction for his research, discovering which nerve to stimulate to wake me up. So he created a world and entered it with me. This world was actually a projection of my consciousness, including the idea of supporting Lucas and cross-dressing. It sounds incredible, but he really did it. Lying in bed, leaning against Lucas, I asked him,
What about Sophia and Samuel?
All those supporting characters were me.
I couldn't help but smile, and Lucas gave me a helpless look when he saw my sneaky grin. I leaned up and kissed him on the forehead. He was successfully appeased, hugged me tightly, kissed me back, and coaxed me to sleep early. Following his lead, we both happily drifted into sleep. Later, I was discharged from the hospital, and both of us went to see a therapist. The story of the little boy that Mrs. Thompson mentioned, I realized after regaining my memory, was Lucas's story. The story was dark, so he never told me the details. But since it reflected in his consciousness, it proved that the memory was undoubtedly painful.
It's hard to talk about, but I'm glad we're facing it together.
I also saw the therapist for my unrecognized depression, and the two of us patients supervised each other in taking our medication daily.
We're in this together. We'll get through it.
As for the rumors, due to other celebrity scandals, I was eventually cleared of the false accusations. The netizens who used to criticize me now hoped I would return to acting when they saw clips of my performances. As my mental state gradually improved, I couldn't let go of acting, so I reconnected with my agent. I started taking small roles again, slowly regaining my confidence and courage in front of the camera. 2 years later, I received my first award, Best Supporting Actress.
You did it! I knew you would!
On the day I won the award, I didn't feel particularly happy or excited. Perhaps having faced near death, I could see fame and fortune more lightly. When Lucas learned about my award, he immediately flew back from abroad to celebrate with me. After the celebration, Lucas and I took a vacation to relax. We watched the aurora together, went bungee jumping, and scuba diving. We did many joyful and meaningful things together.
This is just the beginning for us.
On the last stop of our trip, Lucas proposed to me. It was on his private island. He tricked me into wearing a gown under the pretense of having a Western dinner and took me to the beach. He wore an exquisite suit, and under the lights, his face was handsome, and his eyes were as gentle as water. At the moment he knelt on one knee, fireworks burst into the sky, filling it with large, brilliant displays. The engagement ring was the final auction item, a jade ring. Amidst the fireworks, I heard Lucas's firm and powerful words.
Ms. Evelyn, will you marry Mr. Lucas? In the future, we will walk side by side, and not even death can separate us.
I will.
With tears in my eyes, I accepted Lucas's proposal and put on the ring. This ring was my mother's last keepsake, but it had been taken by a relative I didn't know at the time, causing me much sadness. I didn't know how Lucas found this jade ring, whether it was the original or newly made based on my memories. But that didn't matter anymore. After helping me put on the ring, Lucas stood up, gently kissed my forehead, and whispered,
"This is our mother's blessing for you."
Then he lowered his head, his warm hand cradling the back of my head, and his lips gently touched mine, tracing them softly. From this kiss, filled with longing and tenderness, I tasted my tears. But I was very happy. Because I was moving forward with Lucas's love and my mother's blessing.